I've set up an example here of a scenario, and the idea in this video is to try and help you figure out how to troubleshoot when things just aren't working. What kind of tools do I have available to get unstuck or debug? So that's the intention of this video. So right off the bat, I have a picture of Stitch. You would have guessed anything else. Anyway, so then I also have a heading and I have name goes here. So on a first glance, it looks like things are working on my web page until we look at what I really intended. And so, okay, the image is showing up and it's got a bunch of properties. That makes sense. And then there's some JavaScript that's supposed to be rendered. Got a variable that's being set to my name, which I don't think I'm really doing anything with yet, but let's see. So then I'm getting a hold of this element called Stitch. So what has an ID of Stitch? Well, that's this image. So this variable is getting a hold of the image, okay? And then this variable is getting a hold of something with an ID of the name, which is obviously this ID. And it's supposed to put in there, in an inner HTML, is supposed to be my name, Kirsten. So when this page is done rendering, then there's the H2 and then there's the div. And so when this page is done rendering, name goes here, shouldn't be in here. Whatever was in this variable should be in here, which is Kirsten. And I've peppered this thing with some errors. So if you're already seeing some off the bat and you're looking at a furrowed brow, good for you. But pretend like you didn't see it, because that's the purpose of this video. So on this web page, I'm going to click on, right click and choose inspect element. Now I'm in Firefox. Google has a similar dev tools. So I'm defaulted to inspector. I'm going to go over to this tab that says console and see what console has to tell me. So I'm getting an error message, kind of expected that, and it says document get element by ID is not a function, and it's giving me a line item number 14. So I can click on that line and, oh, that didn't work. That's not what I intended to happen. Usually you can click on that line and it'll take you to that, but that didn't even work at all. So I'm going to look at line 14 in my code, and it's saying it doesn't think that get element by ID is a function. And in fact, if I look at get element by ID, oh, looks like I spelled it wrong. I used a lowercase I. So yeah, that's definitely not a function name. Remember, JavaScript is case sensitive. So I'm going to make it a capital I. That is a function name. Okay, so it should work now. So I'm going to hit refresh my page, and I got another error. Okay, so now it's saying my name is not defined, and it's also giving me line 14. I'm going to click on it this time and see, yeah, there we go. So this time I've got the line being displayed in the debugger. So there's a debugger tag, which we'll use later on. But for now, or I could just go to line 14, and it said, let's see, go back to my console, and it said my name is not defined. And if I look at my name is not defined, so it's telling me it's a variable that it doesn't recognize. And it's doing, it looks like it even tried to highlight what it thinks is the editor's trying to help me. Oh, my name and lowercase name. Yeah, that's definitely not the same. So let me fix that and save it. And let's see what happens now. Still got another error. Okay, so what's happening now? It's saying document get element by ID ... is null on line 14. So what's happening here is the horse before the carriage kind of a thing. So remember that all of these lines are read in order. And so the browser got to this line and the browser said, I need to go find an element called the name. But up to this point, there is no element created called the name. Remember, everything is rendered in order. And so we've kind of got the cart before the horse here. Okay, so if I'm going to reference the element by an ID, I have to make sure that that element was already rendered or read by the browser. It was not. So I'm going to cut that out and put it up here. And now let's see if I can get something to work. And so now it looks like I am definitely getting everything displayed the way I wanted to. So that's all hunky-dory. But I want to give you some other tools while we're here. So some other debugging tools that will really come in handy are, let's do something like, okay, we have in this particular div, for example, this particular variable has this object. And if I'm not really sure what that means, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this variable, and here in my console, you'll see this greater than, two greater than signs. And I'm going to start typing in the word my div. And you'll see that the browser is saying, oh, I know what that is. I think this is what you're referring to, right? So I can hit enter at this point. I'm going to hit enter. And I actually see the element that is in that variable. So if it was just a string, that'd be a string name. In other words, if I typed in my name, I should just be getting a string. And sure enough, I am. So let's look back at my div and recognize that it's an entire element. It's an entire object that we've got a hold of in this variable. And here's how I can be sure that it's there. So here's a good place to kind of do a sandbox too. What if I do my div and I want to, so I have my div has this whole thing in it. So if I do dot, let's say the width, for example, well, it's the browser's trying to help me. Is this what you meant? Yep. And I'm getting the value that was put into the width. So that's kind of cool. Or I can go back and put in alts. So can I use this in my code? Absolutely. We've been doing that in some of our examples. But this just gives you another visual of how you can use this to troubleshoot. To make sure that whatever, for example, if I was concatenating something, let's say I was concatenating var a string equals to my name plus a space is my teacher, and then I saved that and refresh it. If I wanted to type in a string, I can now get a visual of whether or not I concatenated that properly. Here's an example. What if I intended to put in a break return here? So if I wanted to do like HTML break return, so I wanted to do BR, for example. Let's just try this and see what happens. I know I didn't do it correctly yet, but let's just do that. Let's just do BR. Okay, so now if I hit refresh and I type in a string, then I can see what's physically being written in or is physically contained in that variable. So now it should, oh, I never printed the string. I'm like, why didn't that work? Because I never printed it. So let's put a string in here and let's actually see it work now that we know. So now we should see is my teacher. Perfect. All right, that's well and good. Is there anything else we can do to troubleshoot? Well, okay, we can do this. We could also, for debugging purposes, if we wanted to, we could also do something like this. We can use a command called console log, and I'm going to do a string here. So if for some reason you aren't sure if things are going the way it planned, this is a great troubleshooting tool. At this point in time, what is in this variable? In other words, maybe I had done a change later. Maybe I did a string plus or equals another value. But maybe I needed to see at this point in time, what does a string contain? So if I now refresh my page, you'll see console log is actually writing that at that point in time. On line 14, a string contained this information in the string. And then, of course, what was actually put on my page once the page was rendered was the concatenated portion. So console log can be really helpful to help you troubleshoot. Obviously, that's not displaying on our web page, but it's there. This tool is available for us to troubleshoot. One other thing I might bring to your attention that can be very helpful is using your inspector tool. In other words, if I look at my inspector now, we actually wrote this BR tag, right? So in my inspector tab, if I look in my HTML code, you should see that BR was actually written. And why would that be important? Well, sometimes we do things like when it gets confusing, right? We're putting in strings with HTML and we're mixing it with JavaScript. What if I had put in here, maybe I did a H1, and then I'm not going to close the H1 on purpose, and I'm going to do this. So I made a mistake, but you know, we make mistakes and don't always catch it. So when we refresh our page, we make ourselves crazy because we're like, gosh, this isn't doing what how come? And if I look at console, I'm not getting any errors. Why is this not printing out properly? Well, another place to look is in your inspector. And if I look in my inspector and I look at that H1 tag, That does not look like, I don't even need to put that in a validator to know that that's not right. So then that gives me a clue as to where to look in my code to fix that. So, oh, yeah, that definitely doesn't look right. So if I do that now, I should be able to refresh my page and go here. So there's quite a number of tools available to you here in this video. So hopefully this helps you troubleshoot. If you get stuck and things aren't displaying the way you thought, go look in the console and see if there's any red errors. If there aren't any red errors, start printing out some things that aren't, like if your name isn't printing out. Let's say something isn't printed. Well, we'll print it out here in your console. What does my name have in it? Oh, okay. Is that right or wrong? And or you can use the console log command in order to print data along the way so you can see what the computer's thinking. So things aren't coming out the way you expected. Those are some tools you can use. Hopefully that helps when you get stuck, because we all know nothing goes easily, right? Welcome to programming. All right, hope this helps.